Okay, welcome to the Helm Developer Call for January 30th, 2020. Um, we should probably start with announcements. Farina, would you like to tell us the exciting thing that happened yesterday?
I don't know if it's exciting. 3.0.3 is out with about 18 or some group of bug fixes, and I think it's something like 18 bug fixes in it. So um, that's out, and we can look forward to 3.1.0 now.
All right, fantastic. So is 3.0.3 going to be the last release before 3.1.0, do we think?
I think so. Bit of an issue. So when I was doing all the cherry picking from master over to the release 3.0 branch, there were a lot of commits that needed a light amount of touching. It was usually something as simple as accept the incoming change, but I actually had to go in there because it's diverged so much. And one of the issues that was originally brought in caused a bunch of CI to fail because it was actually dependent on a feature that had landed in master because there was enough of a change there. So I would suggest that going with a 3.0.4, unless it's very, very simple, is probably going to be a little bit more difficult because master is diverging enough from the release 3 branch.
All right, so I think this is just the world telling us that 3.1.0 is necessary. We can live with that. Okay, any other announcements before we go into stand up? All right, stand up. Why don't we start with you, Farina? Why not?
All right, so I did the release this week, and otherwise it's been mostly just triaging pull requests and issues, and of course dealing with the Helm hub and merging a bunch of stuff in there. Mostly it's just been in maintainership mode rather than hardcore coding mode. And that's it for me. So with that, I'll pass it on to Butcher.
It has been pointed out to me that you and I now have matching beards.
Yep, they look quite similar.
A little bit of distinguished white right there. I've been playing Issue Q Wingman with Fisher and other people this week as I try and help out getting things moved in. We got issues reviewed in time for the 3.03 release and turned a couple of away at the last moment, stuff like that. And then just been hunting down, trying to see what's reproducible, what's not in the bugs. And then I've been in unrelated meetings all the rest of this week. So let's see who else has a beard fairly close. I think Martin's beard is probably next closest to mine. Bizarre heuristics we used to pick who we're going to call on.
At least they didn't say who was bald with a beard. So we can go with that one. Right. This week, working through a few PRs. So one of them, which hopefully we'll get to discuss at the end, is around the excuse me, a chart that has been created in Helm v2, has its hash digest from Helm v2, and then you try to do a dep build, dependency build with v3, and it doesn't like it. So we have had discussions go over and back with myself and Matt, and with I can't think of a community member as well. So I'm fixing there at the moment, and I'm just putting in a unit test. So let's see how we get it into discussion, if we want to go down that route or not. I'm also looking into being able to set Q context to pass it as a command line param, and also if you want to pass a kube config file without using the environmental variables in the migration plugin, because they're starting to get to that stage now where people are doing fairly, I suppose, more advanced stuff around using the plugin and stuff. So we're trying to get to that, but it also means I have to pass fixes down to Mayor Friedman's Helm v2 utility code. So yeah, I'm kind of in both spaces there trying to work through that. In addition, was doing some reviews and then some triaging as well of bugs. So that's all from me. I will hand over to my compadre for next week, Mr. Thomas.
Yes, I actually made it today. I recovered slightly from jet lag at this point. So anyway, I have been I've been just working through my notification backlog, and then I also moved everything for post render into, hey, please review me stage. So I need a second review and then a re-review. Thanks, Brina. On the post render stuff, so we can get that in for 3.1. I've also created a new repository of some advanced Helm demos and examples that Martin and I are going to show at our talk. So those are going to be hopefully super handy to show people some of the crazy things you can do. And yeah, just mostly working on that talk stuff and anything related to post render. Like I said last time I was in the meeting, if you need me, ping me directly. I'm going to be trying to finish up some last talk stuff around Helm. Lots of Helm things. So that is it for me. Let's pass it off to Fisher.
Hey, so I'm finding some display drivers, so it's not on today. But what I've been working on for the last week has mostly just been issue triaging. So I've been looking at the 3.1 and the 3.0.3 issue queue. Thank you, Matt Farina and Bridget, for pushing that out and getting that in. I kind of have been just mulling over the PR queue and trying to poke and prod people and see where we are with certain PRs, and just trying to make sure that progress is going along as smoothly, making sure that nobody's being blocked and that everything seems to be going along there. So that's mostly what I've been focusing on, is just kind of doing a little bit of mentoring and helping people out, making sure that, yeah, that's about it really, is just making sure that PRs are going through and that questions are being answered when they're being posed. So that is it for me this week. Mark, have you gone?
He said he was having internet issues, so I'm not sure if he's going to be able to speak up, but he can certainly add something to the document if he wants to.
Yeah, in the document, he noted to skip him because his internet connection is flaky.
Right. So I think everyone who usually gives us stand up has, but we will be thrilled to add any additional topics in the discussion period. I will say that my week, Helm related, was mostly shadowing Farina and learning more about the release process, which, hey, is a great segue to our first discussion item. Farina, let's talk about this 3.1.0 thing that you want to have happen. I think we all want.
Sure. So we've got 19 open issues listed for 3.1.0. And you remember 3.0.0 came out in November. So we're talking November, December, January, February. So if we get it out mid-February, we're talking a quarter between 3.0.0 and 3.1.0. So it's probably a good idea for us to look at maybe getting it out mid-February, since there's like 19 open things. Can we target getting it out in like 2 weeks? Would be my goal, which probably means getting the release candidate out in about a week.
Have we done the things to update the Kubernetes libraries yet?
Yes, there was someone who worked on that, and that PR, I believe, has already been merged to get to 1.17.
Yeah, Joe Langford did
Thanks
that.
to, oh, awesome. Well, thanks to his work. There we go. Yay
Yeah.
for community work, everybody.
Yeah, I think he put it up at 1.17.1, I think he's done.
So the only thing I think there's a few tickets in the queue which are regression bugs or whatnot from something that was merged into master, and that needs to either be reverted or fixed in 3.1 before it's merged. But yeah, I think getting a release out in another 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever it happens to be, to get us into a reasonable state is a good goal to shoot for. There's a lot of, we'll probably have to go through that queue and make sure that things we're selectively choosing to punt those until 3.2, or we're choosing to say we need to wait until that discussion has kind of been resolved and move that forward. But I think there is a substantial amount of features since 3.0 has been released. Like we look, there's 19 currently open and there's 48 that are closed, and almost all of them are pull requests. So I think it's about high time that we kind of release with what's in there.
Okay, that sounds pretty conclusive. Does that mean that possibly at this call next week, we can set a definitive goal for when we want to cut the release candidate? Or are we gonna, or Farina, are you thinking we're gonna have already cut it by this time next week?
I expect this time next week we probably won't have cut it, but we will know how far off we are from being able to cut it because we'll have worked through these issues. We'll see what needs to be punted and what doesn't, and maybe have helped some of this along to just kind of get it where it is. So it would be really nice if we could actually cut it next Thursday, but I'm not really holding out hope on that because there are 19 things, but it would be nice.
Okay, so the goal we're setting is that we'll know when we can cut the RC by this time next week.
Yeah.
Awesome. Is there anything else about this topic we should talk about?
Yeah, so to pare down the list or to kind of get through that, would it be okay if I went through the PRQ list and said, these are some of the things that I noticed that are blocking and that need reviews, and then just post that in the Helm dev channel so then other core maintainers can go take a look at those PRs or kind of see where the status is for those pull requests?
That
Just
sounds
trying
awesome.
to figure out how we can coordinate communication and seeing which ones we should consider either moving to 3.2, which ones are ready to go and need reviews, and which ones are just waiting on blocking discussions or whatnot. So I'm just trying to figure out how can we communicate that forward the next week.
That sounds awesome. If you drop any that you see that need discussion in the Helm dev channel, then at least they have a chance of getting that discussion.
Okay. Yeah, I'll go and do that then.
And I'm going to walk through them myself. I just created the 3.2.0 milestone. So if something needs to be moved there, the milestone exists now. So I'm going to
Awesome.
walk through and try to review these as well. So maybe we can even get 2 reviewers on some of them if we need it and get some of them merged this week even.
Great. That's awesome. All right. Is there anything else about the 3.1.0 release we should talk about right now this week before we move on to the next topic? Okay. Martin, you have an issue or rather a pull request that you want to talk about, whether or not it's breaking change. Do you want to run us through that?
In case he's off, I can do it too because it was something we talked about on there. Martin, did you?
No, go. I think we're both on the same sheet anyway.
Okay. We are.
This is going to be a scary week next week, I think. Do you want to say it or will I say it?
I'll go ahead and finish what I was just starting.
Yeah.
Taylor seems to have just frozen.
See?
So Martin, you take over.
This is what happens when you cross an Irish person.
What was in Helm 2?
Oh, you're back, Taylor.
I'm back. Sorry. Yes, here I am. I was saying similar. The time formatting was reverted back to something similar. Helm 2 that was a little bit clearer and cleaner. I am in favor of the change, but the question is about whether or not it's breaking, because somebody pointed out on the issue there is at least one tool that is parsing some time out of table formats. I think it was Helmsman or Helm file. I think it was Helmsman. And so I feel like that's been breaking change in the past. And if it is, we're going to have to say no. So I want to just get some opinions from everybody to see if we're on the right track there and if it should be rejected or not.
Yeah, so the other thing too is that we've gone in using time zones and stuff like that. And yeah, I suppose what do we want to do on that? And then the consistency then with history and so forth as well.
Yeah, I was a little bit more okay with changing the time zone format for the CLI output when that was not informed. But if Helmsman is actually relying on the CLI output, then that is a lot more concerning for that. And also, that does fall right into our semantic versioning contract where we say that no output of the CLI will be changed. Well, that's not true, because we do add new fields and we do add new things to Helm list from time to time. And I don't know, it's a really tough call to make. I really don't have a good gauge on whether it's a good move forward or not, because it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation here. So what's the risk of not merging that PR and saying that the time zone as it stands is what it is? There was one bug that I think someone mentioned about UTC time zones on a Windows machine using Helm, in creating releases, but I think that was the only thing otherwise. Bueller.
I mean, I'm looking at this and I just keep thinking we cannot make assumptions that people know what time zone something is in. And if it doesn't show a time zone, I don't know. I feel like that's an anti-pattern, making people guess and having it possibly break something. I mean, if the trade-off is break something or confuse people, then at least make it an option for them to be unconfused.
Well, we broke the CLI when we moved to Helm 3 because we stuck in the time zone. And all that, the way the PR has gone now, it's just down to the person's just saying, look, the actual, we're putting on too many milliseconds onto the end of it, and let's cut that down. I think that's pretty much where they're going to. The only other point is we now have a discrepancy between Helm history and Helm LS. One has the time zones, one doesn't. So, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Farina.
I was just going to say the only change that's there now in this code is that if you actually go to the issue and you go to the very first update where they show you the current behavior and it's got .993599 on it, right? That's really getting into subsets of a second. The new changed behavior, not the one that's listed at the top here, actually just removes that .993599. The fractions of a second is all that's removed. Otherwise, it is the same format. Am I right?
Yeah, that's the point I'm making. The only one thing here on this is we have a discrepancy between Helm history and Helm LS. So we made the big jump when we went from 2 to 3 and we brought in the time zones.
Yeah.
But looking at it, history differs. So should history be brought into a line with Helm LS? And regardless of what we do, have we broken helmsmen if they're dependent on from 2 to 3?
Well, we never promised backwards compatibility between 2 and 3, right? I mean, we didn't promise that it wouldn't break when we go to 3.
Yeah, we're having this conversation quite a bit, but yeah.
Okay, so here's my 2 cents on this now that I've thought about it for a minute. If you're parsing this programmatically or with your eyes, right, it's actually the same format. We're actually talking about whether it just displays in UTC or in your local current time zone on your system, right? Otherwise, it's still giving you the same time stamp, same offset. I can actually parse it with the same material or the same tooling, I think. I'm not sure if the decimal place throws it off. And so I don't think it's the same time in the same structure. It's just whether the time zone. And so I would probably say, let's see if it breaks helmsman and just to double check. But I would go with updating it to this patch and just make it consistent across everything. I think that's okay API wise because it's just changing the time zone, but it's still the same time zone or timestamp structure.
Yeah, I think that might be a good path forward to see if making that change breaks helmsman or not, and that could actually be a bigger vote of confidence for that. I think that's a good assumption to make too. So, yeah, I think that's good.
Okay, so it sounds like we have a reasonable path forward.
Yeah, I think that's a good path forward to 1, to test if that breaks helmsman, and then 2, to see if that's an acceptable thing. And if it does, then maybe we should have a further discussion. But
yeah,
I think that's a good path forward that we can move forward with that PR.
They probably will programmatically have to change their parsing because whatever language you're in, you're going to have a concept of exactly what the format of it is. So, but let's see if it breaks or not yet.
Okay,
Maybe it depends. So let's connect offline on this, Martin. It depends on the language and depends on what they're doing. That's a maybe question.
I'm all for maybes though. Okay, let's do it offline.
All right. Point of order, we have 2 more things we want to talk about, but since we have 7 minutes left, it would be great if we think about at least whether or not you want to be the moderator and or notes taker next time. So if you do want to, maybe say something or put your name in the assignments. And we are going to quickly look at the dependency digest differing between Helm 2 and 3. Martin has another issue there.
Okay, so I'd like sets of eyes on this to know, is this the route we want to go? So the basic background is that you have your dependencies from Helm 2, V2. It's digested from there. And then somebody comes along and does a Helm 3 dep build, dependency build against that. Then the lock files, the digests are going to be different. So what I've written is, a hash check that basically is checking for the V2 style, essentially is what I've done. So I suppose, is this something we want to do? I think the person that raised it, or the person that's come on the PR, put in a very valid point about charts, that look, if the chart hasn't changed, why is it telling you there's an issue from Helm V2 to V3? So I think that's a valid point. So if we want to take it offline and people can put in comments or whatever, or if anyone wants to say something out, that's grand. I'll put in the test case as well, is on the way.
Okay, it's good to alert us to this. And I think you're right, that sounds like something that we should have people take a look at and see if they want to jump into that one.
Yeah, perhaps the least aggressive approach would be treating the different API versions and the requirements, doing the hash calculation the same as what it was done in Helm 2 for API version V1, and then for Helm 3, if it's API version V2, do that calculation the way it is now. Farina, I see your...
The complication with this is when we did the calculation, it also has to do with figuring out the dependencies. And when you figure out the dependencies to use, the algorithm in the Semver library we're using, we went from V1 to V3 of the library, and V3 is slightly different in certain cases. So there are times where it'll actually calculate a different dependency that should be used. And so if we want to calculate the exact same hash, it means calculating the exact same dependencies. It means pulling in V1 of the library as well.
I completely forgot about that point. Yeah, that's a very good point.
I think, Matt, can you add a comment to that? Because I still can't figure out where the sim version comes into it. So if you look in where it checks the hashing and where it is.
Oh, maybe you're right. In calculating the hash, it may not be. It may just be in calculating the dependencies.
So what it does is it hashes the actual. So I've had to reverse engineer it and hack it to understand how it works. So essentially what I can tell is it takes the dependency structure itself, but it just needed a particular. It had it as a map and then an array inside in the map. And unless I laid it out that way, it wouldn't take it. But it's
I see where you're going. I see where you're going. Now I know what you're getting at. I can review this. I'll take a look at it today. I get where you're going with it.
I don't think the sim version is involved, just an FYI.
Yeah, you're actually likely right. So I'll go take a review of it today.
Thanks.
Okay, awesome. We have 3 minutes left, and Farina, there is a -- name flag that you were going to update us on.
So last week we talked about the -- name flag and restoring it to Helm 3 because there's a pull request wanting to do this and an issue. And well, we really didn't like that because we'd moved away from it. Why have -- name and name on things like Helm install? But the problem comes up, and credit to, and I'm forgetting his name, who wrote the pull request and justifying it, that many of the tutorials actually have -- name and copy and paste things. And I went out and I looked, and it turns out lots of charts, not just in the stable and incubator repos, but all over, use -- names in their README on install instruction in order to give it a name, because then you can use it with, delete and things like that. And so the idea was, all right, let's go ahead and restore -- name, but we can make it a hidden flag. We can mark it as deprecated, but it'll still work. So all these copy and paste examples that everybody has still will work with Helm 3. And the reason was just, we don't want it breaking on everybody the experience when they're reading things and trying to figure it out. But that's kind of what we looked at. Does anybody have any issues with that?
The only concern that go ahead, Taylor.
Go ahead, Fish. No, go ahead, Fisher. You finish.
The only concern that I originally had, and why I was originally going ahead or saying go ahead with this PR, was that I thought that maybe the name argument, like the positional argument and the name flag, how we parse that and how we treat those might be a little bit weird, between like how you can argue between the two. But then in Helm 3, we refactored some of the argument and flag parsing, and actually Adam did a fantastic job on this. And the code introduced is not that difficult to understand and also not that hard to maintain. So from a code maintenance standpoint and the CLI part of it, it seems fairly straightforward and easy to do. My only concern is still with the SDK, and I'm not sure how we can work around that. But from the code standpoint, everything seems great.
Why is it an issue for the SDK?
I think it's not necessarily an issue for the SDK. I think it's a concern about the behavior, because before in the SDK, you could pass the args array, which could contain the chart name, and then you could also pass a release name in the install action at the same time to that flag or to that function, and you would return no error. It would return, I'm not sure what the behavior was back then on whether it would return the release name or it would return the chart name, but that was an okay, acceptable thing of the function. But now it'll return that error saying that you can't pass both at the same time. And I think that's actually a valid bug.
Yeah, and I think that's valid. I'm less worried about the SDK as long as it works, and more worried about the command line experience, because our reason for adding it back is more the copy and paste code, the tutorials and the instructions out there, and they're interacting with the CLI and not so much the SDK. And so we should clean it up and just make sure what we pass to the SDK is appropriate.
Yeah, so I guess my other thing here, like, I don't have a problem with this one in and of itself. I just, and the part of me that makes me want to say yes is because it's helping people with their copy paste stuff. But I mean, if we set this as a precedent, I mean, we're going to keep supporting flags like this for years, it feels like. And so I don't know. That's I guess my holdup on it. I'm not necessarily opposed. We already did this once with the -C flag on Helm version, but it kind of feels like, yeah, it's going to break some stuff, but eventually it's going to be something that, like, we need to get rid of something at some point, right? So I feel like waiting major versions then go drop the name flag. I don't know. Maybe I'm ranting a bit.
I mean, it sounds like what you're saying is we want to be careful about setting precedent. But hey, this is not court of law. This is open source. So we could put right in the pull request or the issue, FYI, we are going to consider these on a case-by-case basis. Do not assume this sets precedent. I mean, I don't know. Just say something like that. And then when people later are like, my tiny corner case, and we can be like, no. Sorry, Farina, you were going to say something, but yeah.
The same argument could be made for like Helm delete -- purge, which was changed to -- keep history and was enabled by default. I mean, there could be cases there where people may have been, or there may have been readmes that had Helm delete -- purge in there quite often, and then we broke them. But I think making it as a statement of a case-by-case basis and saying that, listen, this is just like, we see this happening absolutely everywhere. The code maintained, this is a case-by-case, and it seems to be acceptable. I think, yeah, if we are going to go ahead and merge that, I think putting somewhere in there saying that we are not trying to set a precedent here, this just seems like a good, valid reason to put this back in. So.
Yeah, and I think this one really did have to fight its case to get in. The default answer was no, and then a darn good case had to be made that this was worthwhile. And just the issue alone kind of shows that precedent. It's not just here just to be nice or just to do backwards compatibility, but there's a real reason. And in this case, like, I'm pushing for, when somebody uses the -- name flag, they get a deprecation message that shows up in their output. So they are made aware that they need to change to name. And so it's not just we're going to accept it and it's easy to maintain. We're actually letting people know gracefully that even though this is widely used, it is going to go away at some point in the future.
Oh, that's a fantastic thing. We could also do that, that stupid JavaScript hack that was like put a time.sleep for like 10 seconds whenever you use the flag. That might be kind of fun. That's actually kind of rude for a production use case, but kind of a fun social engineering thing to consider. Anyways.
I don't want to screw up people's CI pipelines by putting unnecessary sleeps in there. So let's not be hilarious.
Okay.
Okay. Is there anything else? We're 4 minutes over, but is there anything else we need to discuss before we say see you all next week?
Nope. See you all next week.
See you all next week.